Want to welcome everyone to the Healthy is Better podcast. It is brought to you by the St. Luke's University Health Network. My name is Crockett from Cumulus Media Allentown. And today I think is a pretty important conversation. Our topic today is managing your mental and emotional health. Certainly in the last year to 14 months that we've had, I'm sure a lot of us have been giving a lot more consideration to this topic. And I'm actually very excited to talk today to Amy Allanson-Dundon. She is the Network Director of Clinical Therapy Services and a psychotherapist at St. Luke's University Health Network. Amy, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to jump right into the first question. It's important to pay just as much attention to our mental and emotional health as our physical health. How should someone go about making this a priority for themselves?
So first, thanks so much for having me, Crockett. It's an important conversation. You're right. So there's a few ways that I really think about managing our mental health. From the time that we're born, we manage our physical health. We have pediatricians that walk into the room that we're born in, and you have a physical doctor. Really, our mental health should have that same priority in our lives, for ourselves, for our family members, for our kiddos, so that it becomes routine, and that saying I'm going to go see my family doctor is valued the same as saying I'm going to go see my therapist, or I'm going to go get a massage for stress management, or however that might be said. It's so important to reduce the stigma so that everybody feels really free to, be able to tell people that they are putting the emphasis on their emotional health just as they are their physical health. You need to see your family doctor, and when you go to the family doctor, you need to talk about how you're doing physically, but you also always need to talk about how you're doing emotionally. And I think that's the first way to start, is to lend it that sort of importance.
I think it's so interesting the way that you kind of put that you go to your family doctor and they give you all the physical things that you need. Listen, if you need to go and get a back massage because your back is bothering you, a brain massage sounds pretty good, just to kind of handle the mental things that maybe you're dealing with. So stress seems to be interwoven in our lives. How can we cope with and manage stress, and what strategies do you recommend?
So stress looks a little different today than it did a year and a half ago, doesn't it? Right?
Sure.
We've had stress, obviously, our whole lives. But you go back to February, March of last year, and all of a sudden we have all of those same stressors, but now we have pandemic stress and all of the things that go along with pandemic stress. So that's a 24/7 stress that we've all been living with for about 14 months now. So that is cumulative trauma. It is cumulative stress. And we need to give it a little bit higher importance than we were giving stress pre-pandemic. So what I mean by that is this. If normally you liked to go and take hikes in nature, and that was your stress management, and maybe we've stopped that because of COVID and the pandemic and going outside, or we maybe have given that up for whatever reason, we need to get back to that. We need to figure out what's the stuff that elevates my mood, helps me feel happy, helps me process positive thoughts rather than negative thoughts, and that's the stuff we need to be doing. So if there's something that you love to do that you're not able to do anymore because of the pandemic, then we need to go to plan B, and we need to find plan C, and we need to figure out what we're doing to cope. We've been cooped up for a long time. So, it may be something new. It may be something different. If you have unfortunately had COVID and maybe are still recovering or still have some side effects, your ability to cope may look a little different than it did pre-pandemic. So I think it's really important that you sit down and kind of even write out a list and say, all right, what's the stuff that makes me feel better? What brings me joy, right? And that's the stuff I need to get back to.
It's interesting. I, for the longest time, had conversations with my wife once we had our firstborn, where I felt like maybe she was kind of a little stuck in the house a little bit. And I said, you have to find some time where you're not mom, and you have to find some time where you're not wife. You have to find some time where you're Caitlin. And it's interesting as everything transpired as it did over the last year, I found myself taking my own advice because, as you said, we've been cooped up. The ability to go out. Look, I love to go and play a game of pickup basketball and do all those things. And for the longest time, I don't even know how much we realize how important those things were to us until they were gone, until you missed out on those opportunities to do that, week after week or whatever you were doing. So I just think it's so important to reiterate your point that, man, we really do, as long as they're healthy activities, really need to find things that are just for ourselves to kind of, if nothing else, just kind of shake some of those mental cobwebs we can get caught in a little bit.
Yeah. I think it's really important to kind of take a deep breath and say, okay, how do I recenter myself, right? How do I ground myself? Because we've been really caught up in that 50,000 foot horrible news that we've been watching just in general of COVID plus life, right?
Everything. Yeah.
And if we've got kiddos under the age of 24 in the house, it's a different kind of stress with school and college and what we're doing in terms of maybe working full time and now we're working full time from home, and that we never did that before, and our kids are homeschooling and they never did that before, and so life is different, and I think instead of saying, I just want to get back to the way it was, I think the mantra needs to start to be, I need to start to accept and learn to live with the new normal.
I think as we have gone through this process together, I'm thinking, I'm curious how many people have taken that first step to maybe talk to a therapist, because I think there is, we talked about going to see your family doctor or going to get a back massage. There's something that's very vulnerable about giving your emotions to someone. And it's not always easy to maybe have those conversations with your family because you don't know how necessarily they're going to feel about what you have to say. And that maybe embracing a conversation with a therapist is the best thing that you can do. But what is important to talk with family, friends, and your doctor about your mental and emotional health as you're kind of trying to deal with those things?
So I think I mentioned family doctor because generally that's the doctor that we're the most comfortable with. It's the one we go see the most. It's the one we call when we get a cold or when we have a sore throat. So that's generally the best place to start. I think the important, if you're not somebody that's really used to talking about your emotions or your feelings, the best way to start is really with the word I, rather than putting it on somebody else. I think, I feel, I want, I need. So when you're talking to family, when you're talking to doctors, it's okay to, in terms of being vulnerable, own your stuff and say, I'm feeling really stressed and I have been trying to cope on my own. I can't get through a book. I used to be able to read a book. I can't sleep the way I used to sleep. I need to talk to somebody about it. And, that's the best way to start. And first you have to be honest with yourself, right? You have to be able to look inside yourself and say, okay, what's not working? Sleep, hugely important. Is our sleep messed up? Are we falling asleep on time? Are we waking up in the middle of the night? Are we waking up early morning and not being able to fall back to sleep? If we're not getting proper sleep, that affects our mental health. So, there's no wrong door in terms of how to get to therapy or how to start talking about this stuff. And honestly, therapy is really, I'm so happy that over the past year and a half, it's really become a whole lot more talked about, a whole lot more accepted, because everybody's realizing, gosh, everybody on the planet has now experienced a ongoing cumulative traumatic event.
Sure.
There's none of us that haven't had trauma in the past year.
Sure.
So certainly there's a different extent. It's affected different people differently depending on your personal experience. But it's important to recognize that maybe you're not feeling right, or maybe something is just a little off because of your brain's kind of reached its capacity to cope with stress right now. And that's something you need to talk with a professional about, and that's okay.
Do you think, listen, I'll put my cards on the table. I've been with therapists before. I've been to therapy. And for anybody that has ever wanted to close the door behind them and have a conversation with me about if it's something that they should do, I 100% recommend it. Do you think part of it, and again, to your point, I'm thrilled to see that a lot of people are reaching out more than they have before. And again, I think a brilliant point that we are all in the same, somebody in some way this past year has been affected by what's gone on in some sort of very strong way. There isn't anybody that hasn't been affected by the last year. That's for sure. Do you think that there is, I mentioned maybe not wanting to be vulnerable with someone. Do you think that there is maybe a stigma around wanting to talk to a therapist, that maybe if you were to say, go to your family or go to a friend and say, hey, I'm going to a therapist, that there is maybe a negative connotation that's affected with that people are afraid of? Because again, I think about it and I tell people, I'll tell you 1,000 times over, if you get the opportunity to go and talk to somebody, do it. But do you think that is maybe part of the equation as to why maybe people don't want to take those steps?
Yeah, Crockett, I think you're right. I think that as much as we try to break free from the past and past generations and even cultural views of therapy and talking about our stuff with somebody other than our close family unit, that all comes into play. I know that therapy and going to get help for your emotions and for your behaviors and for your thoughts, we have evidence all over the map that doing psychotherapy doesn't have to be long-term. 3 sessions, 6 sessions, sometimes that's all you might need. That greatly reduces chances of developing any sort of chronic, ongoing major depressive disorder or a post-traumatic stress disorder. If we can get to therapy sooner rather than later, it's going to prevent chronic illness. And we know that depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, we're talking about, chronic mental illness, no different than chronic physical illness, whether it's a heart condition or whether it's cancer. So it's really about doing yourself a favor. And if you've got symptoms that are concerning, you get them checked out. It's what we do. You may need 1 or 2 sessions. You may need a year. I think you're right. Everybody should at one point in their life have a therapist, have been through therapy. You'll be amazed at how it will help, as you said, kind of clear the cobwebs and give you new direction.
I think, you're kind of leading me into my next question here, in that even if we do, I'm certainly hoping that if somebody does want to take the first step towards having conversations about their mental health, that they do have people close enough to them, friends or family, whomever that may be, that can give them positive words of encouragement, steer them in the right direction. However, that also could maybe be a little bit of maybe steering you away, because maybe you feel like you've talked to family or friends about it, you've gotten it off your chest, but there is just such a different conversation with a professional, a therapist, somebody that maybe isn't going to give you what you necessarily want or need to hear. So I mentioned you're leading me kind of into my next question here. When do you decide that, okay, the conversations with people close to me aren't enough and I should go seek professional help?
So my answer to that, the simple answer to that is, are your symptoms interfering with daily life? Are you not focused at work? Are you losing things? Are you forgetting things? Is your concentration impaired? Are you gaining or losing weight that's worrying you? Are you thinking about hurting yourself? Have you thought about suicide? I'd never do it, but it's crossed my mind. That's the stuff we need to be talking openly about. And those are the things that need to kind of be the flashing blue light in your head that, okay, I need to go talk this through with somebody. There's no symptom that's too small or too large to get help. So don't think, it's really nothing. I don't want to bother somebody with something that I think is minor. if it's your stuff and it's in your head and it's bothering you at all, you talk about it.
We've kind of addressed the past year and everything that's gone on. We've kind of gone into this next question a little bit, but I'm hoping you could just elaborate a little bit more on some things that maybe you've seen on your end. What trends are you seeing when it comes to the pandemic and mental health?
So we are here at St. Luke's. We're seeing a whole lot more kiddos in therapy, which is a great thing, right? Because it means that schools, guidance counselors, school counselors, parents are pediatricians are starting to recognize and identify kids that, maybe aren't handling this as well as we would have liked or hoped.
Sure.
So we're seeing a higher trend with kids. Interestingly enough, we're seeing a higher number of adolescents since we instituted video therapy, because our adolescents love this platform, right? They love the connection this way. They're really good at it. They're better than we are as adults, and they're more likely to attend sessions, engage in sessions, and we're seeing a whole lot less no-shows for therapy with especially with our adolescents who just this is the best thing since sliced bread for them, and it really works. Not so much for our littles who maybe have ADHD or ADD. This is hard. So that we have kiddos that need to focus, they're coming in the office. But so we're seeing a whole lot more kids. Unfortunately, we're seeing a whole lot more kids with thoughts of self-injury, feeling a whole lot more isolated, and that not going to school and or not playing a sport or not going to Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts is really affecting their social development. And that is leading to, in a lot of cases, self-esteem issues, boundary issues, and just making it really difficult to navigate as they develop. We're blessed to live in an area of Pennsylvania where we have really great healthcare. That also means we have a lot of people employed in healthcare in this area who are pretty tired at this point. Sure. In terms of taking care of everybody with issues related to COVID, and then all the normal stuff. So we're certainly seeing it's really great. We're seeing a much greater reduced stigma with our healthcare providers at all of our major networks who are saying, yeah, I need to talk to somebody. This has been a rough year, Sure. So, I think we're just seeing people kind of throwing in the towel and saying, yep, it's time. I need to talk.
It's really interesting that you brought up the virtual element of things, because I think maybe a big part of the process previously was, I always like to use the idea of dipping your toes in the water. Like, you maybe you've talked to a therapist, and like you said, you're dealing with a lot less no-show. So maybe you've gone as far as scheduling an appointment, but man, when the time comes and you're an hour away from your appointment and you got to get yourself together and get in the car, and maybe you're in the car and you're thinking about these, this kind of eliminates it, because it says, hey, if at 3:15 I've got an appointment, I can go into my own space where I'm comfortable, have a seat, and start having these conversations. I've got to think, certainly, at some point we're going to look back on this last year and start to pull some of the good things out of what did happen. And I think our ability to connect virtually in a positive way and still get things done, in whether that's been in business, in life, in your mental health, whatever it is, I definitely think that's one of the things that we're going to look back on and say, okay, if we got to start pulling positives out of this thing, certainly that these virtual appointments and things of that nature are at the top of that list.
Yeah, I would agree. And I hope some of it stays for sure. Now, the flip side of that is, it keeps us in our house and isolated. So we're going to have to find a middle ground. And really, here at St. Luke's Behavioral Health, we're seeing about a 50-50 split in terms of patients coming in, or just people coming in for therapy, and one either wanting the in-person or wanting the virtual. And we're offering in-person to everyone. So it really is a preference at this point. And then based on what sort of symptoms somebody has. For some people, in person is much better. And for others, the virtual is just fine.
I think it's fascinating as we've been having this conversation. We've kind of gone full circle as you talked about how kids are doing. You're seeing more children, certainly virtually. And one of the things that you mentioned is how they're missing that social element of getting out and going to Little League or Boy Scouts. Mm-hmm. And man, didn't we start this conversation with the same thing for adults? Like we had these routines, we had these things. I'm still a kid at heart. The fact that I could do something wrong, Amy, and that I could get arrested and not just like detention still boggles my mind. Like if I were to actually do something wrong, that would be the case. But that mental break in whatever it is, whether it's playing, township basketball or playing pickup basketball at the park when you're not a kid anymore, those things are certainly really important, which is going to kind of lead me into my last question here. With more people becoming vaccinated and COVID restrictions being rolled back, is it natural to feel apprehensive about things opening up? And what advice do you have for people that are navigating this anxiety?
Yeah, I think it's supernatural. We were talking about it just among ourselves as therapists, and the CDC has said, if you're fully vaccinated, you don't need a mask outside, and on all those other things that they're coming out with. And yet I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready to not wear a mask outside. So it really, we spent a year training ourselves, and now we're like, I don't know if I'm ready to untrain myself. Sure. So it's really, really normal that we're all kind of apprehensive. What am I supposed to do now? And what was yesterday? And what's next week? And it can be overwhelming. So I think, the important thing is you do what makes you feel safe as an individual. Certainly, don't get your information from Facebook. No offense against Facebook. Love Facebook. But go to the CDC website and get your information from the World Health Organization or the CDC if you're going to make an informed, educated decision about mask wearing or about social distancing. Get it from the right source so that you can say, I've made a really informed, healthy decision for me. And then you're going to have to let go of decisions other people are making for themselves. And that's the hard part. I'm going to listen to my doctor. I'm going to listen to World Health Organization. I'm going to listen to the CDC. And I'm basing my decision on that. And you don't have to let anybody else dictate how fast or how slowly, you open yourself back up, so to speak.
Well, I'm certainly happy we got to have this conversation today. I think to your points that we started with, that I think it's very often overlooked, the mental exercises that we need to put ourselves through just as much as we put ourselves through the physical exercises. And again, no, I don't think anybody's going to be looking at the past year and giving it 2 thumbs up, but hopefully some of the things that we can come away from in the past year is setting up these sort of virtual appointments and just talking to someone, because it is so important. And I think all of us, to your point that you made earlier, at some point this year have felt it for one reason or another. And there just needs to be a place to start with some professionals who can help try to get you going in a good direction.
Yeah. And I would say, so, my takeaway is talk to your child's pediatrician, talk to your family doc, or call the number on the back of your health insurance card to find out who might be in network with your health insurance. Or, every county has a mental health office or a drug and alcohol or a substance use office. So, just get in touch with someone to start to figure out, the best course of action for yourself.
Well, I've got to say, I want to reiterate how much I enjoyed our conversation today, Amy. She is Amy Allanson-Dundon. She is the Network Director of Clinical Therapy Services and a psychotherapist at St. Luke's University Health Network. Our topic today was managing your mental and emotional health. If nothing else, I hope anybody who's tuned into this today is going to take a step away and feel a little bit more informed. And I mentioned dipping your toes in the water. Maybe you're ready to go full dive in and try to take some steps to help yourself with those things.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It is the Healthy is Better podcast. It's brought to you by St. Luke's University Health Network. We can't wait to bring you the next one. Hopefully, we're doing this a lot more down the road and can give you some information that is very wonderful with the fine folks at St. Luke's University Health Network. My name is Crockett from Cumulus Media Allentown. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Healthy is Better podcast.